Amazon S3 Scalable Storage. In this particular section, we are going to look at Introduction to Amazon S3 Buckets and Objects. We'll go over managing permissions and storage classes. We'll do a hands-on exercise on building a simple S3 based file upload app. And finally, we'll do a project 3, which will create a static website hosted on S3 with custom domain and security settings. So let's jump into it. First, introduction to Amazon S3 buckets and objects. Amazon S3, also called as Simple Storage Service, is an object storage service that offers industry-leading scalability, data availability, security, and performance. It is designed to store and retrieve any amount of data at any time from anywhere on the web. Some of the key concepts for this include buckets. Buckets are containers for storing objects. Each object is stored in a bucket and every bucket is created in a specific AWS region. Bucket names must be globally unique across all AWS accounts. And sometimes in our projects where we created buckets, you saw in our previous examples where we tried to give some name which was already taken by someone else. So it asked me to or prompted me to change the name. We have objects. Objects are the fundamental entities stored in S3. They consist of the data itself, metadata, and a unique identifier, which is the key, within a bucket. An object can be any file, such as images, documents, backups, or log files. And then we have the keys. Each object in S3 is identified by an unique key, the file path, within its bucket. Some of the common use cases for S3 include backup and restore, data lakes for big data analytics, static website hosting, media storage for mobile and web applications, and disaster recovery. Basic operations in S3 include uploading objects. Files are uploaded into a bucket. Each object can be up to 5 terabyte in size. Retrieving objects. Objects can be accessed via their unique key using the S3 API, AWS SDKs, or the AWS Management Console. Deleting objects. Objects can be deleted individually or in batches. Next, let's look at managing permissions and storage classes. Now, S3 offers a flexible permission model allowing you to control who can access your data and how they can interact with it. Permissions can be applied at both the bucket and the object level. Let's look at some bucket policies. Now, the bucket policies define permissions for an entire bucket affecting all objects within the bucket. Policies are written in JSON format and can be used to grant or deny access to specific AWS accounts or public users. Here is an example of a bucket policy where we are doing the effect to allow principal everything. Action is s3.getObject and resource is the bucket that we want. Then we have the access control list or ACLs. ACLs grant specific permission, which is read write, to individual AWS accounts or groups. Example, public access. ACLs are less commonly used than bucket policies but still useful in some cases. Then we have IAM policies. IAM policies can be used to manage permissions for individual users or roles accessing S3. For example, you can allow an EC2 instance to access a specific S3 bucket by attaching an IAM role with the appropriate permissions. Next, let's look at storage classes. S3 offers different storage classes optimized for varying use cases in terms of access, frequency, cost, and durability. First one is the S3 standard, which is designed for general purpose storage of frequently accessed data. It's high availability and low latency. Durability is 99.99%. S3 intelligent tiering automatically moves data to most cost-effective access tier based on access patterns, suitable for data with unpredictable access patterns. Then we have S3 standard or infrequent access, which is S3 standard IA, ideal for data that is less frequently accessed but requires rapid access when needed. Example, backups. Lower cost than S3 standard, but with retrieval fees. We have S3 Glacier, low cost storage for long term archiving. Retrieval times can range from minutes to hours. And then we also have S3 Glacier Deep Archive. It's the lowest cost storage class for data archiving. Retrieval times are typically in hours. Let's go over hands-on building a simple S3 based file upload app here. For this exercise, we'll create a simple web-based application to upload files in an S3 bucket. So for these, the steps that we'll follow is we'll set up a S3 bucket, we'll configure the bucket permissions, we'll set up AWS SDK for file upload, and we'll test the application at the end. So let's jump into it. Let's get started. So step one is set up an S3 bucket. For this, what I'm going to go do is go to my S3 dashboard here. So if you have never used this before, it'll probably say create bucket right over here. So I can just go ahead and directly say create bucket. In here, I'm going to say general purpose, and for the bucket name, I'm going to call it my file upload bucket, something like that. Let's see if this name is fine. I don't know, let's see if it works, but we'll know. Next, it says copy setting from existing bucket. I don't have anything, so I'll leave it as it is. Next is ACLs disabled, which is recommended, so I'll keep all that. Block all public access. Make sure that you have block all public access for security reasons here. And then bucket versioning, disable, tags, nothing, leave it as it is. I leave the rest of the stuff, default encryption, everything as it is, and say create bucket. So that will, if my name, of course, toots is what I'll call it, and create bucket. Hopefully this works, and my bucket is created. Now next step in this particular case was to configure the bucket permissions. So go to your bucket and go to the permissions tab here on the top. Since it's block all public access, I'm going to just remove this for now. It's going to ask me to confirm, and I will add my policy right here. I'm going to say edit, add a new statement, and inside here principal is star, and allow action is S3 put object. That's my permission action that I want, and to resource is this here slash star, and save the changes. So that will complete our second step, which is configure the bucket permission. Now next step is to set up the AWS SDK for file upload. So first I'm going to open my terminal, and in here the first step in setting up AWS SDK is install the AWS SDK. Now it's a web application, so you will probably use something like Node.js. If you have Node.js installed on your computer, that's good. If not, you can go to Node.js and check it out. There's a bunch of different options, but I'm going to go the Node route. You can check your Node version by saying Node-v, which means I have it installed. If you see something else, just go ahead to Node, just Google Node and then install Node. So clear this out, and first thing I'm going to do is install AWS SDK. That's the Amazon SDK. So once I do this, so inside this setup AWS SDK, the step that we have to do is configure the AWS credentials. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my AWS here, and here I will try to get my credentials, because I can't upload it without the credentials, and I've deleted all the credentials from before. So I'm going to go to my account, security credentials, and here I am going to create, I already have an access key, looks like here. So I am going to delete this one first of all, because I don't want that. Let's say delete, and create a new access key. New access key, I understand, create access key, and it created this access key, and I will go back to my, I'll go to my terminal and say AWS configure. It will ask me my new key, my secret, This is fine, JSON is fine, clear, perfect. So that should have our step for setting up AWS SDK completed. So now that we have set up the AWS SDK, let's go and do the file upload. So for that, I'm going to open editor and save this on my desktop as, I'll call it upload.js, since it will be a JavaScript file. Constant, first I'm gonna require the AWS SDK, so I'm gonna say that AWS-SDK file. Next thing that I need is the file service which I can upload files, so I am going to say require-fs. This is in Node, lets you do file operations. Next, I want to configure the AWS SDK with region and credentials, so I am going to say aws.config.update, and region that I want to use region that I want to use is US-East-1. You can always cross check with your object of where it sits in Northern Virginia, which is US-East-1, so that is good. So I'm going to go back to my editor and complete the code. So this will configure your AWS SDK with a particular region. Then I'm going to create a constant s3, create a new instance of that by saying new aws.s3. That's the function that you create. I need the bucket name, so I'm going to create a bucket name variable, and for this I am going to give the bucket name, which in this case is my bucket name. Next, I want to write a function to upload the file, so that will be, I'll call it upload file, not make it too complicated, and which takes a parameter of file path, and to that inside here I'll get the file content first from the file path before sending it. So file content equal to fs dot read file sync. So this is the function which is provided by the file system to read a particular file that you have provided, and that file will be converted to bytes, so it is ready to be sent. Next, I need to set up the parameters of my request. In this case, I'll say bucket that I want to upload to is bucket name. Next parameter that I have to give is key, which is, I'll give this, okay, this one. Inside that I'll say uploads slash dollar. I'm going to use the date parameter dot now, and the underscore dollar. So this is the, I'll use the file path just to make this the reason I'm doing this is to make a unique file name, file path. So that should uploads slash, it will add it in that particular for as a create as a key, and then I'll say body is whatever body I have, which is file content. Perfect. So that completes my parameters. Next thing, s3 dot upload, that is the method that I can call on the upload, the s3 instance which I've created, s3 variable that I've created here, and it needs params, and if there is error or something, that will be given over here. We'll run this and write this here. Perfect. Next thing is if error. So let's say if something went wrong, I want to see what that is. Console.log, I'll say error, I'll print out that error. And next, if everything went fine, I'm going to run the else loop where I'm going to say console.log, and I'll say, I'll give a special character so it can use my variables. Uploaded successfully at the location that will be passed back to me, which is data dot location. That will come back from this data parameter right here. So that's good. Next, let's make sure that everything is closed properly. So this here, and then where is my closing for? Okay, the main file here. I'll move it up so you can see clearly. Close this up, and now let's upload a file. So to upload a file, you call the upload file function, and pass a file to it. Let me see if I have a file. Let's make that ready. So I'll create a new file. I'll just say test file and save it to my desktop, and I'll call it testfile.txt. Okay, that's the file that I'll save, and here I will give the path to that file, which is testfile.txt. Let's make sure testfile.txt, that's the right name. You can test. Okay, perfect. So now we can run this. The next step in our thing is test the application. Now you can upload this to Lambda or create a EC2 web server and then run it from there. But what I want to do is I want to run this from my local. Now let's run node upload.js, and it says file successfully uploaded to this particular. So let's go back and check if it's uploaded to this particular location. I'm going to open this, make sure I am in my uploads folder, and there is the upload folders created, and there is my date time with the file path file right over there. I can download this file and see if it's the right one. I can, if you want to check this, I'm going to open that, and if you look at the, once I open the file, you'll probably see it's the same file as the one that we created, which was this one, text file, and if you see, it's uploaded. So that's a successful hands-on project for this. If you had any questions or issues, let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. Project 3. Create a static website hosted on S3 with custom domain and security settings. In this project, we will host a static website on S3 and configure a custom domain and SSL, which is HTTPS, for security. For step 1, we'll be setting up an S3 bucket for static website hosting. For step 2, we'll point a custom domain to the S3 bucket, and in step 3, we will configure SSL, which is HTTPS. So let's jump into this and start with our project 3. Step 1 is set up an S3 bucket for static website hosting. So for this, what we're going to do is we are going to open our S3. I'm going to click on create bucket, and here I am going to give my name as, let's say, AWS Training Academy.com, which is the URL probably that we'll pick later. If I get US AWS training, I'll use the AWS training, but yep, let's see. And I'll say remove this block called public access. I acknowledge and leave everything as it is and create my bucket. Next, let's go inside this and create permissions. And inside my permissions, I am going to change my bucket policy here, and I will say edit, because I want to get I will create a policy where people can access my or read my files. I'm going to say principal star allow. Action is S3 get object. That's what I want to do, and then resource in this particular case is this resource right here, say /star. So that should work. I am going to save these changes. That takes care of permissions. Also, we'll go to properties, and at the bottom I will say edit, enable, and host a static website. So this is for static website, and I will create two files, index.html for my main page, a default page of the website, and error page if I want to show an error page. So I'm going to create those two files. I've already created those files. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring them in. One of them, the index.html, looks like this, where it says this is home page, and I have created error.html file which says this is error page. So I'm going to take both those files and upload it here in my bucket. So both of them look fine, and I'm going to say upload, and I'll upload both those files, and they are available here at this particular place. I'm going to close this out, go to properties again, and at the bottom, if I click on this URL here, it should say this is home dot, because that's my index page, and if there is error, I can also look at error.html, and this is error page. So both of them are uploaded fine and they are available right now. So the next step now is to point a custom domain to the S3 bucket. I don't have a custom domain, so I'm going to go to Route 53, say 53. It will give me an option here to create a register a domain. So why not just go ahead and register a domain? So it has options to registering a domain or transfer existing domains. So I'm going to create a new domain for this particular training. I'll try to see if AWS training is available, which probably is not available, of course, but it has AWS Training Center available, AWS Training Academy. So I'm going to use, I think, awstrainingacademy.com. I'm going to select this, and it says it's $14. I'll say proceed to checkout. Auto renew is turned for one domain, which is this one. I'm going to turn it off because I don't need this domain. I'm just doing it for the training purposes, so I don't care about it. And I'm going to press next. It asks me for my contact information, so I'll fill this up and forward this up. So once I fill out the entire contact form, I am going to say next. AWS training, it's all good, contact information is there, terms and I have read, and submit. Look at check status here, and the check status is saying that operation ID in progress, so I'll have to wait for a little while. I'll wait for it and then I'll come back in a few minutes. So I got an email saying that my domain name is available, so I can go to now the hosted zone, and you'll see our URL is available along with a hosted zone. So I'm going to click on this hosted zone, and here I'm going to create a record. I'll say it's an alias, and the endpoint is alias to S3 website endpoint. Choose the region to US-East, the same that where we hosted the endpoint, and it will automatically show me this S3 endpoint that I've created. I'm going to set that, and I'll say create records. So this should be good. It's going to take a few, as it says, it's going to take a little bit time to show to point kind of create this record, and so we'll wait for a few seconds and then we'll open the website in a new tab. So our website is this one. I'm going to copy it and keep it ready, and there you go. As soon as I say awstrainingacademy.com, it opens up the website, and I can say /error.html, and it show me the error page right here. So that kind of completes our step to point a custom domain to S3 bucket. Now it says next step is configure SSL HTTPS using AWS Certificate Manager. If I go back to the website, something that you'll figure out or realize is it says on the top not secure. So if I say HTTPS : it will not work because we have to create something called as the SSL HTTPS using the certificate manager. So let's jump into step number 3. I'm going to go to my AWS management console, and here I am going to go to the certificate manager, which is this one here, and here I have this option to request a certificate. So I'm going to say request a certificate. I'm going to say request a public certificate, request a public SSL TLS certificate from Amazon. That's what we need. So I'm going to say next. DNS validation or email validation. Since I have the access to modify the DNS configuration, I'm going to select DNS validation. If you don't, you can always use the email validation. I'll keep the rest of the stuff as it is, and I'll say request. Now next, it's asking me the domain name. My domain name was AWS. That's AWS Training Academy. So I'm going to take that and enter it here. Okay, perfect. DNS validation, everything looks good. I'll say request, and now it will say certificate request where the status of pending validation has been created. Further action is needed. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what this validation is. So inside this, now I can go here, and if you see pending validation, and this is asking me create records in Route 53. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click on this, and for this particular thing I'll say create records, and say successfully created DNS records in Amazon Route 53 for certificate. Perfect. So that has been created. I'll go back to certificates again. Let's see, it says pending validation, so we'll wait for it. And it says status is issued, success. So it worked perfectly fine. So we have the certificate created and validated. So next step is to set up the CloudFront for HTTPS. So for this, you have to go to CloudFront, which is AWS Content Delivery Network Service, and create a distribution. So I'm going to go to CloudFront and create a CloudFront distribution. And it says choose the AWS origin to enter your origin domain name, and that is this one. It will automatically show up. Next, the origin path, which is optional, so I'm going to leave that as is. Name I'll leave as it is, public, and add header. I don't have to do anything else. Pattern default HTTP and HTTPS. Get head. Caching optimized, looks fine. So for this I will select do not enable. That's fine. Create distribution. So that is created. Now I am going to close all these things. So once my distribution is completed or enabled, I'm going to go here and do one more change, which is go to edit, and here alternate domain name I am going to give my awstrainingacademy.com as the alternate domain name. Save changes. Next, I'm going to go to Route 53, and inside my hosted zones, this zone, I'm going to create a record, say alias, select the CloudFront distribution, and choose this one that I've created, the certificate, and say create records. Name already exists, so this one, we already have that. So what we are going to do is, since we had created to point to S3 this one, now we don't need that because my CloudFront is pointing to S3. So I'm going to change this one to CloudFront, and destination is this one this time, and save. So that should be saved. Now we have that. Now we can go to the website. Let's go back to our awstrainingacademy.com, and that's our error page. Let's go to index.html, and we have the index.html. So now we have the HTTPS working too. So this kind of wraps up our entire project, where we did set up a S3 bucket for static website. We did point custom domain to the S3 bucket, and we finally configured SSL, and that was working. So if you have any questions or had any issues while following along, let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. Thank you.